Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are looking at the GE discounted vehicles when it comes to War Thunder, and this time it's time to have a look at Britain. Britain obviously has all of the major branches, so this is going to be a long one. When it comes to all of these videos, I have put timestamps in them, so if you want to have a look at different sections, make sure to click on them. When it comes to the ground stuff, there's a ton of things that are available for the British. You've obviously got stuff like the A13, which is not really worth it because it's too low BR, and also at the same time, the rank 1 for Britain isn't that bad. The A1E1 Independent, which is, it's one of the worst heavy tanks, but at least it's iconic. The reason for it is because it's the oldest vehicle in the game. I think it's from it's in the 1920s, maybe 1925 or 1928. Whenever it's from, it is very old when it comes to the ground portion. It is the oldest ground vehicle. Obviously with naval we have some early 1900s things. So it's cool in that way, but as an actual useful vehicle, no, it isn't. The guns on it, the 47 is not bad, but the armor doesn't really hold up, and it doesn't have any extra stuff on top of it. I suppose if you're with friends and you just want to have a bit of fun, it's not a terrible pickup. The Crusader the Saint is the vehicle which is available in the starter pack, and it works very, very well. It's got the stabilized 2-pounder. It has a vertical stabilizer on it, which means that you can usually get the first shot off. It has very good penetration, and if you are struggling against some of the heavies, then you can always just scout with it, which works fantastically well. One of the things I really like about the Crusaders as well is they have a ton of smoke grenades, so they just pop them out the top. This means that you can move between capture points very quickly and also cover yourself as you go. It also means if you need to reposition as a scout or as an aggressive flanker, because this thing has pretty good mobility, you can do that pretty well as well, so it just works fantastic. The Cromwell 5, the RP3, the difference between this and the standard one is, well, it gets 4 RP3s. The Cromwells, in my opinion, are super fun to play. One of my go-to lineups when it comes to Britain is the Cromwells and the Sherman 2. For me, that is just bread and butter when it comes to the game. I have never played the Cromwell RP3, but I've played the Cromwell 5 a lot, and I really like the 75 on it. I like the mobility of the Cromwell. The armor is where it gets let down, and also the reverse speed. Everything else about it works fantastically, so I suppose if you enjoy some rocket things, this is the way to go. Once again, though, a lot of the rocket things in the game are way too expensive compared to what they're actually worth, so probably not worth it at the end of the day. It's probably better just to play the standard lineup here. Then you have the Sherman 1C Trizniek. The Trizniek is part of a very powerful 4-7 lineup for the British. You got the Avenger, the Churchill Mark 7, the Crocodile Churchill, which is coming in with the Battle Pass right now, and then also the standard Sherman Firefly. What the Trizniek is it's a Polish Firefly. There's no difference between it and the standard one. The only difference is that it has premium bonuses on it. And since it's a rank 3, you can use it for daily specials and all of that good stuff. This one, I would say, is a really good pickup. The only issue with the Firefly is its mobility probably isn't the best, and the gun is a little bit wobbly, but once you get used to it, it's not too bad. The gun depression isn't the best either because of the huge breach on this thing, but you'll get used to it, and the additional penetration that you get on the round, I think, easily makes up for it as a vehicle. Then you got the AC4. The AC4 is one of the Australian vehicles that we have in the game. This one, I would say, does better than it actually shows. So the AC4 doesn't have a lot of armor on it, but it does have the standard 17-pounder. It doesn't get the APDS though, but still can do work with the standard AP. It has a decent reload, it has good gun depression, its mobility is okay, I suppose. It's not the best in the world, but it's not the worst. Its actual reverse is a lot better than a lot of British machines that you have, and it does have the 4-man crew, so if the turret gets popped, you die. But the thing that is interesting about the AC4, it's kind of similar to the Ram for the Americans. It has really dodgy armor. So there's a lot of oddities when it comes to its turret and the angles that it has. So a lot of people ricochet shots off of it that they generally not supposed to ricochet, or they don't think they're going to ricochet, because it's made up of so many odd angles and odd parts. And even the upper glacis, even though it's only 50 millimeters, because of the angle, it can get up to 120 quite easily, and even just 110. So a lot of people can bounce shells off it without really even realizing. And since you don't see a lot of AC-4s around the place, I think it's a pretty decent vehicle because of that fact. Like people aren't used to fighting it, so they're not entirely sure where to shoot it. And if you shoot it center mass, as long as, you know, they don't hit this here, then it's going to be able to ricochet a lot of rounds. So I actually like it quite a lot as a vehicle. Then you've got the Centurion Action X. So the Centurion Action X, of course, is a Centurion with a proto turret on it. This thing is really good. It's part of a fantastic lineup for the British. You know, the 7.3, the 7.3 Carnarvon, and then the Centurion Mark III. You also have the FE4202. This is the one that you replace if you buy the Centurion Action X. It also has really good RP returns and pretty decent SL returns on it. Has access to the 20-pounder, so it's got the two-plane stabilizer when a lot of vehicles you face don't have the stabilizer. And then also at the same time you have the APDS, which basically pens through anything like butter at the BR. Even the heaviest of tanks, the only things that you'll struggle against is angled IS-4s. Everything else you will just annihilate. So the two-plane means that you can get the shot off first before anything, and the turret, being the way that it is, it does have some weak spots in it, but it also, once again, just like the AC-4, has these awkward angles that you can easily bounce shots off of. The hull, though, is a standard Centurion hull, so you'll be able to just annihilate this really easily. And also, at the same time, this does get the enhanced mobility of the Centurion compared to earlier vehicles, meaning that it does actually get a reverse. It doesn't have the best forward momentum, but with the stabilizer, you can just be aggressive as much as you want, because you know for a fact if the enemy's moving and you're not, then you will be able to take them out. Just to give you an idea of how powerful these machines can be, I can give you my stats of the Israeli ones, these shots, just to give you an idea of how well you can do in them without really too much. So you can see plus 100 in the Calef, the standard shot 2-to-1 KD, the Gimel, which is one of the weaker ones, was still plus 50 in it. Like they are just fantastic vehicles in general, and the Centurion Action X is no different from that. For the helicopters, you actually have probably one of the strongest 10.0 helicopters in the game, which is the G-Lynx. There isn't actually that many better vehicles in the British tech tree than the G-Lynx. What it has access to is, first of all, it has access to some air-to-air stuff, so of course the Stingers, which aren't doing great right now, but you know, it's better than nothing. Then also gets access to 8 Hellfires, so it's general weaponry, if not something that you can fully rely on. It still works very, very well. It also gets access to countermeasures, so you can, you know, break radar locks and also break other stuff coming towards you. You also have thermals, so you can see you know, stuff from miles away. And the main thing is that this thing is super quick and agile. So if you see anything coming towards you, it's very easy to kind of defend against it, especially with the thermals, because you can see stuff coming from miles away. So the G-Lynx is super powerful. It's really good and will work not just in ground with the really nice 10.0 lineup that you have for Britain. You know, you obviously have the Challenger Mark III there now, and the Vickers, and also some of its other stuff like the Challenger Mark II and the TTD you can bring along. You could obviously bring it up at higher BRs as well. It's also good in heli PvE because of its general armaments. You can get up to that AH Mark I as well, which has some pretty fun armaments as well of itself, including, of course, the Starstreaks, which are very interesting compared to other air-to-airs that you'll find around the place. A lot of people use them in very interesting ways that maybe we'll get into in the future. For the aviation side of things, there's actually a pretty decent lot of quite nice premiums, but I will also say the British tech tree was one of the first that I ground through to rank 5, and I had a fantastic time with it. You know, there's a lot of really nice areas of it. Most of the Spitfires are very good, apart from the Seafires. The Tempest is really fun. The Typhoon locks up, but it's also great at certain speeds. And the Hurricane is one of my favorite vehicles in the game, so generally it's pretty nice. They've also had a lot added to it over the last period of time, which has made it very much fun to play through. So I don't really think premiums are needed for this one, just obviously time and enjoyment. Tux Gladiator is one of the early ones, plus also the Wirraway. If you want a bit of Aussie pride, I suppose you can pick up the Wirraway. It's got a nice bomb load on it, but it's not really got anything else. It is a pretty cool model though, so you could at least see that in some way, but it's just not going to be that useful. It's got good RP on it, but it's no different to a lot of other rank 1s that exist. Then you have a bunch of American planes, the Hudson, the Avenger, and then also stuff like the Corsair. All of these vehicles are fantastic when it comes to their general use. The Avenger is very good in naval. The Hudson, I wish it had a slightly bigger bomb load, but just from a general kind of light bomber standpoint, it's completely fine. The Corsair is broken, as we've talked about before. This thing is nuts. It's very good, and it's good in every single game mode. So it's definitely worth a look. And the Spitfire Mark IIA Venture is the one from the starter pack, so that'll probably be on offer in the future. It's a really good aircraft. It's just a straight Spitfire Mark IIA with a different skin, so it's basically just better premium bonuses, and that's about it. When it comes to the other areas, you have obviously the boomerangs. I don't know if these are available anymore, but these get out energy for their engines are not strong enough, and they're not good enough turn fighters to fight turn fighters, so they're in a really rough space at the moment. Then you have stuff like the Hellcat and the Thunderbolt. Both of these are solid, really good vehicles. Once again, some of the best for multi-role purposes. The torpedo for the Hellcat means that it's always going to be useful in naval, and the 1,000 pounders, which drop individually now, are very good when it comes to ground forces. It's also not too bad in air either, so same with the Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt has a really nice bomb load drop and also is good multi-role. It does everything well. The only thing it doesn't do great is low speed turning, but just don't be in a position where you're at low speed and turning. Simple as. Mustang Mark 1A, this is one of the first premiums that I ever got. I would say I always liked the armament on it, the 20mm Spanos. The engine has a tendency to overheat, which is a bit of a problem. It does have a ton of camos, so you can kind of grind them out and have a good time with them, which is really nice. And there's a ton of different ones that you can find, which is super fun. But it's only really been buffed over the last few years, especially with the Hispano change. It doesn't climb well enough, so you kind of engage in second into a battle, which is not great. The Hispanos are good in ground forces. You can pen a lot of stuff from the top and do a ton of damage with them, but it doesn't get any extra secondary loadouts from there. So generally not great in ground because there are much better air superiority fighters. But it's kind of one of those which is not the best at anything, but it's like an 80% up there on everything. So in any scenario, it'll be good. It just won't be the best. So you'll get beaten out by certain things, but the vast majority of stuff you'll be able to beat out in itself, which is quite nice to have. The MB5 is kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. I really like this vehicle, even though it's not very good. It's obviously clipped wings. It's got the Hispano Mark IIs. They're kind of like shotguns. It's got the contra prop. It doesn't turn very well at all. It bleeds tons of energy in the turn, which is not great. But it does go in a straight line pretty quick, and its general rate of climb is just not good enough either, just as a vehicle at this BR. But it's fun for me. I know a lot of people won't enjoy it. It gets bullied a lot by other vehicles at its BR and around it. But I think it's quite fun. That's and that's the main thing at the end of the day, if you're having fun or not. I do think there are better options though, such as stuff like the Spitfire Mark 9C. This is one of the early Griffin Spits. Sorry, it's the Mark 14, not the Mark 9. It's one of the early Griffin Spits. It has the 7.7 still, and also the 20mm. It works very well alongside Plagueis's, which is one that they bring back, and then Prendergast, which is one they bring back. This one is easily probably the best vehicle you can get for propeller-wise to grind out the whole tech tree in Air Realistic or Air Arcade. It does get a £500, so it can be useful in ground, but it's not as good as other things that exist, so probably not the best. The Hornet The Hornet is fun to play because it gets an air spawn, so you can go after bombers super efficiently. It's at the BR where a lot of Ju-288 spawn, so you basically just go after them. And also it gets 2 1,000 pounders, so you can use that in ground pretty efficiently as well. But I would still take the Spitfire. I think it's generally just funner to play. The Attacker FB2 is very similar to the FB1, so it has a good flight performance. A lot of people don't like the Attacker. I think it's pretty good. It just doesn't have the best straight line speed at its BR, but its maneuverability is really nice, and also at the same time, the guns, the way that the convergence works on them because they're on the wings, means that you can have a pretty decent spread while trying to go after other aircraft. So for me, I've really enjoyed playing this one. I had a fantastic time with the Tech Tree one, which was good. And I'm sure many other people would too. At the same time, it also has a really good bomb drop, and since they moved up the Vampire to 8.0 now, the Attacker is actually a really good option to run with that 7.0 or 7.3 lineup or 7.7 lineup that you have for Britain, which is insanely strong. Then you got the Reaper. The Reaper's just a heavy meteor. The later meteors are not very good. The early meteors are very good. The Meteor F Mark III and C Meteor are very good. This thing is not. It's just at a very awkward BR for it, and one of the main reasons why you're supposed to use it is because it has this like really good 1,000 pound bomb loadout. This thing goes up against radar AA. They chew it up. It's not good at all, really. When it comes to its flight performance, it's not fast enough. Its guns are okay. The Mark Vs are good enough to annihilate everything, but it's just one of those like middlemen aircraft. In War Thunder, what works really well is something like an air realistic, I should say. It's either a really good air superiority fighter or it's a really good ground attacker. This one is somewhere in the middle, and therefore at this BR it gets eaten alive, so it's definitely not worth it. The Sea Vixen is fun, I would say. I had a great time playing it. It has access to red top missiles. You do need a lot of setup on this thing, meaning that you do need your team to be functional. And usually they have issues when it comes to functionality, but you can kind of feed off them doing silly things, like if they engage in turn fights too quickly, you can come from the top and then down and hit stuff with the red tops or the fire streaks, depending on which ones that you prefer. I think this is one of the earliest machines with missiles, so it can be a good way of kind of training how to use missiles, especially since the red tops aren't the best missiles in the book, but they're not the worst either. It does have a lot of speed behind it as well, so you can disengage quite effectively with it, and as long as you have support from at least one other fighter, you can carry games pretty efficiently in this. It is just four missiles and done though. It does get access to bombs, so you can use it in ground as well. I think that there are better options though, like the Vampire and other vehicles of its ilk. Then you've got the Harrier GR1. The GR1 is a weird one. They took away its air spawn. It doesn't have countermeasures, so it's very much a aircraft which is very situational nowadays. The SRAMs that it gets access to are really good, but they can be flared off super efficiently, and we've seen more and more and more vehicles nowadays which have access to countermeasures around these BRs. So I think the GR1 is in a pretty tough place right now, and I highly doubt it gets down BR'd because of how powerful the SRAMs are. So I think it's just kind of stuck in hell at the moment. It still can be very efficient if it gets down BR'd and goes up against a lot of 9.7s and 9.3s without countermeasures, because then if it gets even close to a target, it just dies. But that's not really the meta right now. The meta is stuff which has all aspects, and then also stuff which is very fast, which the GR1 kind of is neither. So it has a bit of a rough time of it. For the naval side of Britain, there isn't actually that much which is on offer. There isn't a ton of stuff. There are some decent picks though, like you got the Valhalla and then the Verdun. The Verdun is a much better pick than the Valhalla, just because of the fact that it has access not just from these quick firing 4-inch guns, which are really powerful against destroyers and also against smaller stuff. You also have some 20mm to actually keep you alive, which is not usual from lower tier things. You also have the Jervis. So the Jervis is a J-class, and it's part of the ridiculous 4.7 vehicles that Britain has now. You can see how many 4.7s exist. There's also the Haida, I think it is, which is also at 4.7. But the Jervis is Not too bad if you want to get a vehicle to grind out the 4.7 stuff, but I don't think it's required. That's the thing. I think already Britain has some really good ones. You know, it already has all the battle classes. It has the N class, the K class, and of course the Diana as well, which is probably going to get up yard at some point. But yeah, it's a solid vehicle. It has the standard 4.7 inches on it. They all have really good. They can all hit really well because there's nothing really in the way of them, so you can hit at pretty decent angles as you go around. You also have stuff such as very good AA armament on it as well. It's just I don't think it's required. Like the lineup already is insanely good, so why not just like kind of grind through these ones? Then you got the Belfast. So the Belfast is here. This is of course one of the weaker 5.7 cruisers, but if you are going to grind through Britain or you want to get to the highest echelon, this is probably the best choice that you can pick. It has 4 triple mounted 6 inches. It has, of course, the 4 inches on it and the 40 millimeters as well. So you have the dual ones all over the place. So as a standard like heavy cruiser, a high tier, it's not bad. It's just not as good as other ones. It's pretty much as simple as that. The matchmaking is not bad though, because you don't get into the 7.0 area where the battleships are, so at least there's that. Also, there's still a lot of expansion that Britain can get when it comes to its rank 5. This will probably change into rank 6, or at least cut it off at rank 6 at some point. So the Belfast, with its really good rewards and also low repair cost, might be a way of getting through them. But I've had a really good time with the Blue Water Tree for the British. Obviously, it's got a bit of a weird place here, but this stuff is really fun. The Coastal Fleet, there's not a lot on offer. The MTB-1, don't bother with it. The MG B-75, don't bother with it either. Doesn't have enough armament or survivability to be useful. And also at the same time, you already have some really nice lineups in these BR brackets for the British. The 2.0, the 2.3 ones are really good. The 2.7 one and also the 3.0 ones are all really nice. So you can just kind of play through them and have a good time. You have the Orla. Don't bother with the Orla. Not worth it. It's got no survivability. It's a huge machine and goes up against destroyers a lot of the time. It's a big target, so people target you a lot. It has access to a 76, which is nice. You can pump out damage, but the 76 doesn't overpressure smaller ships. So that just means that you're ending up having to put 1, 2, 3, 4 shots into things to try and kill them. Everything else about it is alright. It actually does have APDS for its 20 millimeters, which is hilarious. But everything else, it's just too big. It doesn't have any armor and just dies way too quickly for it to, be worth a pickup. And also at the same time, I wouldn't say like the high tiers of British coastal naval are that good. It kind of dies off at 3.3. Everything else is just kind of a bonus. So yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to the naval stuff. As always though, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank Forge, Siegebreak, Carrion Crow, Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, and also Sem Arslan, Wilkski, Uncle Bean, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.